Work, work, let's work. Work, 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 work. What's up, Big Dog? This is Coach Rolle, and we are back in the lab with Big Dawg Trench Talk. I'm in the dog house with my big dog chain, talking to you about football, talking to my dogs about the game at the line of scrimmage. There's nothing more exciting for me when I think about the podcast. I think about how important it is because when I played college football at the University of Florida, I was often very overwhelmed with the plays I had to remember, the responsibilities I had. Every team we had a scouting report. We even had a test, you all. I had a test on the bus on the way to the game. And if I didn't score over a certain percentage, my D-line coach did not play us because he figured, right, we couldn't be trusted. And so there was so much pressure, playing in the SEC, playing against these big time teams. At the time, Steve Spurrier was my coach. And that within itself was a ton of pressure because at the time, he was the only college coach getting paid over $1 million. So everybody wanted to beat the Florida Gators. To be able to, during that time, to have had a podcast or to have listened to someone that could simplify the game for me. If I had something like this when I was in high school, college, when I played professionally, to just in my own time and space, really listen to and really dissect what a specialist or a professional coach or a detail coach had to say about the game, I would definitely listen to it. So when I say I'm excited about these podcasts, I am, because it's almost as if I'm talking to myself when I was playing football, or I'm talking to a coach when I first started coaching the game and I didn't feel like I knew enough. Either way, these podcasts are very important to me because it's my way of going back in the past and speaking to myself, whether I was a player or a coach, as to how to be the best at this that I could be. So I'm definitely excited for another episode. This is episode 2, season 3. And today's episode is explosive drills. Explosive drills. You all have been pouring in and asking, whether it be in the YouTube comments, whether it be emails. This question has come to me. Coach, what are some exercises and drills to enhance a lineman's burst off the line? What are some exercises or some drills to enhance a lineman's explosiveness at the line of scrimmage? This is very important. It's a great question, and I encourage you athletes and coaches on our YouTube video to comment and to ask questions because that's what Big Dawg Trench Talk is about. It's about you knowing the details of the game at the line of scrimmage because we know domination is in the details. Being explosive off the ball is very important. When you talk about creating chaos, okay, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the year that the latest year that they won the Super Bowl, one of the D-line coaches, Coach Lowe, awesome coach, she talked about playing with a controlled chaos. And chaos was about the details, yes, but it was definitely about the destination. We know that when we're lined up in our stance, we are behind the line. But when that ball is snapped, we want to be on the other side of the line. That's chaos. Chaos for an offense is when you are somewhere where you're not supposed to be, right? Which is in the backfield. Unless you're getting trapped, unless it's something like that, or some kind of zone option concept, right? But other than that, if you are knocking the guy back, if you are penetrating an offensive line, if you're doing any of those things, then that's chaotic for an offense. And so being explosive off the ball creates chaos for an offense. And that's what we want to do. We want to create chaos. And in creating chaos, it means that we have changed our destination. I might be on my side of the line pre-snap, but I've got to be on the other side of the line post-snap. That's what it is all about. So I understand the question is a very important question, and we're talking explosion. How do we get our athletes to be explosive off the ball? So coaches, when we look at being explosive off the ball, there's really two parts to this in answering this question. I want to talk about this from a biomechanics standpoint, and then I also want to talk about this from a football IQ standpoint. And then I'll tackle the drills. Because it's not about just the drills. It's not about having, good drills that help with explosion. There are some drills that can definitely help, and we'll get to that. But to be very honest with you, getting a lineman to be explosive off the ball first has to do with their biomechanics. I don't care how great your drill is. If that athlete does not have the fast twitch fibers, if you have not created fast twitch fibers within your strength program, then it's going to be very difficult to see that explosion that you're talking about. Let's talk about the word explosion. So to me, coaches, athletes, when you ask about explosion, first thing that comes to my mind is load. In order for there to be an explosion, there has to be a load phase. How can we get our athletes in a position? Because we know that to be in the right position really is what gives us the ability to produce power. The power is in the position. If I'm not able to get into the right pose, then it's very difficult to produce power. And so this is where I'm talking about the biomechanics. Truth of the matter is, some athletes do not have the flexibility to get into the right pose. Flexibility plays a huge role into loading. When I have my weight room playing with my athletes, there are a lot of triple extension. I'm sure you all have heard about triple extension. Triple extension, when we say triple, we're talking about the ankles, the knees, and the hips. Talking lower body mechanics. When your hips, knees, and ankles are extended, we call that triple extension. Triple extension has a lot to do with explosion. Triple extension has a lot to do with explosion. So exercises like kettlebell swings, if you drive through the balls of your feet, not your heel, which you should. But if we're talking about explosion, we're talking about releasing the heel and driving off the ball of our foot. So kettlebell swings is a good example. If you're driving through your toes, it's a good example of triple extension. Power cleans is another great exercise that is working fast twitch fibers, right? Muscle fibers, and is another example of triple extension, okay? Then you have high pulls, from a hang position. That's another example of triple extension. But here's the issue. A lot of times when you see athletes doing these exercises, we don't always properly get into triple flexion. When we're doing these exercises, we don't see athletes get into a triple load or a triple flex. Triple flex speaks to bending. It's to bend, extend, and bend. We need to be able to get into a triple flexion before we can have a triple extension. And that's where a lot of the times the error is. When athletes are getting into the position for a kettlebell swing or a high pull or a power clean or even a deadlift, oftentimes the triple flexion isn't properly hit. We're not hitting that 90 degree and under when we're hitting these positions. And so you'll see the reason being is because of flexibility. Flexibility plays a huge role. It is very important, which as big guys up front, we don't often think about. However, flexibility is one of the keys to power. Do not look past flexibility. Do not look past being able to get into certain positions to be able to produce power, okay? Flexibility is one of the keys to being powerful and being explosive. So for me, when you say the word explosion, you think about loading, getting into the right positions. So many athletes, especially that are younger, don't have the flexibility to even get into a proper stance because they don't have the flexibility, okay? So where are those areas where flexibility is kind of tough or flexibility isn't always there? one of the number one areas. In all of my years of training, I found this to be the most consistent is the hips, the hip complex. The hip complex tends to be the tightest. And because the hips are the tightest, oftentimes the hips are too high in a run stance or a pass rush stance, and you don't often get the explosion that you'd like to see because the hips are tight. And because the hips are tight, then the knees aren't in the right flexion, right? That front foot should be at a 90 degree most of the time, and the back foot around the 120 most of the time. But if you don't have the hip flexibility to hit those angles, you will not produce the power you are looking for, right? And then you'll see the ankle mobility. The ankle mobility isn't there. And so you'll see where their feet will start to turn out because where the calves and the Achilles is, it's not there. But a lot of times it starts with the hip complex. Big dogs, I highly recommend getting your hips, okay? Make sure your hips are flexible and mobile so that you can be powerful. So that's number one. Flexibility will help you produce the most power that you can at movement, okay? Again, talking biomechanics. Something else that is very important is you have to train your fast twitch fibers. When we are lifting weights and we're working at an 80%, 90% work capacity, 95%, and yes, we're getting stronger, understand that those exercises, those reps take longer. They take longer depending on the percentage you're working at because it's heavier weight. Now, even though that's great and you're showing strength and you're showing increases in your deadlift and you're showing increases in your squat, that's not necessarily working your fast twitch. Your fast twitch fibers are going to come from you moving as quickly and as fast as possible to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. This is where you are now doing exercises, right, with no weight or very little weight or a light vest. Plyometrics is going to be pivotal when it comes to being explosive because when you talk about plyometrics, you're talking about jumping from a loaded position and then triple extending somewhere, wherever you're going. So you can do a box jump. And again, being in a good load first before you even jump is crucial. But being able to go from a seated position, not saying that you're sitting, nothing wrong with that either, but from a 90-degree seated position and then going from A, which is seated position, to B, could be straight in the air, that's very important to do. Or from a seated position, jumping onto a box, that's important to do. From a seated position, jumping onto one leg, jumping from one leg onto one leg, jumping laterally, dynamically, you name it. However, we have to we have to define these muscle fibers. When our athletes work out, Big Dog, when you go and work out, you are ripping your muscle fibers apart. And when you do that and they come back together stronger. And when they come back together stronger, this is where you have to define them. You have to tell those muscle fibers what you want them to be. It's almost like having a business and employing an employee. You hire someone. They are now working for you. Now, what is their job? What do you want that employee to do? What is their task? When you have new muscle fibers, when you recruit muscle fibers and they are now working for you, now you have to tell them what kind of muscle fibers you want them to be. And if all we're doing is lifting heavy weight over and over again, always working at an 85, 90% in our load, then when in our weight room program, are we telling our muscle fibers to be fast and quick and explosive? So we have to be able to incorporate that in our weight room program. We have to understand that the weight room, okay, is the base and the foundation of our field play. We get maybe let's just say 4 sets of 10 on the squat, okay? So that's 40. And let's say you're doing that 2-3 times a week, okay? That's 80 to 120 reps. Well, you might get more reps in the squat than you do doing get-offs on the field. So your weight room and your field is not separate. You've got to train your body the way that you want it to perform on the field. your weight room and your field play need to be blended. They need to be woven together. They need to be connected so that to your body, there is no difference. And that's when you know you have a true program. And that's how you establish explosion. Plyometrics is very, very important to be able to get our biomechanics in position, our body ready to be able to be explosive. We have to train explosion to be explosive. The next thing is very important to me, and this is your neuromuscular function. Your neuromuscular, your nerves and your muscles working together is very important. And now we're talking about response. We're talking about reaction. We're talking about ignition. We're talking about how long does it take for you to move? Not necessarily how fast you move, but how long does it take for you to move? And now we're talking about response. So here's where also in the weight room, whether it could be catching tennis balls. I'm sure you've seen athletes that have their hands on top of a partner, and the partner has two tennis balls and their hands are on top. They have no indication as to when that partner is going to drop that ball. It's all response. They're looking, they're seeing, and they are responding. And so now we have to train our neuromuscular, our response system. You've got to train it. It's not something that just comes. You have to train your neuromuscular activity. This is why in my weight room, giving y'all some secret sauce now. This is why, especially with my college and pro guys in the weight room, when I train them in off season, when they're doing deadlifts, I'll often have them not go off of just reps. They don't just go when they want. They will do the rep when I give some kind of indicator. So I might be snapping a ball. And when I snap a ball, then they execute a deadlift. Proper technique, core engage, the whole nine. If I drop a rag, if I drop a tennis ball, if I'm an offensive lineman and I'm moving or I'm pulling my hands off the ground, I'm giving them some kind of indicator that movement is happening, then they will execute, they will carry out that rep once they see me. On both sides, right eye and left eye. Stuff like that, things like that help your neuromuscular activity. So it's not just about the volume, right? It's not just about how many reps you're doing, though that is very important. We can also include some neuromuscular function within that in the weight room. So now when you go on the field and they're seeing the ball move, they're seeing the lineman move, well, again, you've done those reps in the weight room. And now here you are, you're starting to see a little bit more quicker response. You're starting to see better neuromuscular function on the field because this is something that you started in the weight room. So far I've talked about flexibility, which is important to get into a loaded position to explode. Then I've talked about fast twitch fibers, being able to train your muscle fibers to be quick, to be fast in order for us to see that explosion. And then I just talked about neuromuscular function, your response system, your nerves and your muscles working together to operate and move fast. That is important to train that. And then I mentioned a lot of plyometrics. In the weight room, when you're talking about being explosive on the field, my point in saying all of that is that, to be honest with you, Big Dog, it starts in the weight room. It starts with your weight room program. It does not start in the field. I know you all are asking me for drills, and we're definitely going to get to some recommended drills. And on our website, bigdawgfootball.com, I definitely have some drills for you in regards to get-offs. But it doesn't start there. It continues through drills, okay? Now, from a football standpoint, from a football IQ standpoint, what is very important, as I mentioned in my previous podcast, is, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it is identifying, being able to identify formation, being able to identify what I am looking at. If I am looking at empty, if I'm looking at 10 personnel, and I have identified down in distance, then I should be ready for a pass rush, or I should be ready for a double team, or I should be, depending on the formation and personnel, I should be ready. My point is that when I am looking at an offense as a defensive lineman, I'm looking at the box. I should be ready and I should be prepared for what I know I'm going to get. A lot of times, we don't often see explosion from our athletes because they don't know what's coming. It doesn't mean they're not fast. You may see some guys that may be very fast and quick off the ball, but when it's time to play football, you're wondering, where is that speed? Where is that explosion? Where's that quickness? It's still there. They just don't know when to be quick, when to be fast. They don't know when to be explosive because they're trying to prepare for something they don't know is coming. Sometimes we don't have that explosion because they don't know. The fear of the unknown. When you don't know, then you don't go into your future. You don't go into what's next in confidence when you don't know. And that's why it is so important to be able to talk to my coaches and athletes to be able to help these athletes identify what's coming. And if they can identify what's coming, they can put themselves in a better position to be quick, to be fast. Because for me, if I know what's coming, I'm going to be fast. If I have an idea of what I think I'm going to get, a double, a scoop, a reach, a down, I'm going to be fast. If I don't know what it is, then I'm taking 2 steps to figure out what it is. So sometimes, again, it's not that they don't have the ability to be fast and quick. Sometimes they're trying to process, athletes are trying to process, what am I preparing myself for? What's coming? And that is an issue. You're not going to see explosion and quickness if the athlete is confused. So that's important. As much as we don't always talk about that, it's very important and plays a huge role in the game when an athlete is confused. Can't have confidence if there's a ton of confusion. However, this is a big deal to me, what I'm going to tell you right now in regards to explosion, getting athletes to be explosive, is going to be trigger tails. Trigger tails. I did a video on the website, again, bigdawgfootball.com, and the drill is called trigger tails. What are your trigger tails? What are you looking at the line of scrimmage that's going to help you indicate when you should move? We're talking the when. Sometimes you'll see an offensive tackle or a guard, they would have taken 2 kicks and that defensive lineman has just taken a step. Well, it's probably because they're looking at the wrong thing. Their eyes may be in the backfield looking at the quarterback. Their eyes might be in the backfield looking at the running back. Those are 2 things that a lineman will look at if they don't know how to read what's in front of them. They don't know how to read formation. They don't know how to read personnel. So they're trying to track the back. They're trying to track the quarterback or they're trying to track the running back. And if that's the case, they're always going to be a step behind. Your trigger tail should be at the line of scrimmage. The first trigger tail that we teach, and I've been teaching for years, is the ball. And I will never disagree with looking at the ball. However, depending on the position that your lineman is in, sometimes it's hard to look at the ball from a 2-eye or a G, what we call it now, or a 4-eye or a 6-eye, especially a 6-eye. You're so far away from the ball. It's very difficult to find that ball and look at that ball from those inside eye positions, right? Because I have to be able to look at the guy in front of me and he's going to tell me where to go, okay? And I have to look at the ball that's going to tell me when to go. That's very difficult. Very, very difficult to do. So the ball is definitely a trigger. When that ball moves, I know it's time for me to move. But when you're in those eye positions, gentlemen, dogs, sometimes the lineman's hand, his down hand, is going to be a trigger. That lineman's down hand is going to be the new ball. If that lineman is in a 2-point stance, okay, and his hand is on his thigh, then when that hand leaves that thigh, once they get set, that's going to be your new ball. If it's a pass rush situation, I've heard a lot of my pro guys say they like to look at the back heel. The back heel is going to be the new ball. Given the situation, we have to teach athletes. You have to know that depending on where you're lined up, you've got to watch film and you got to know what should be my trigger tail. Is it the hand leaving the ground? Is it the back heel move? right? Is it the elbow pulling back on a kick? What is it that I should look at that's going to be my trigger tail? And those three are pretty good ones. You know, obviously, if you're a nose, the ball, I'm looking at the ball. So I've heard athletes also say, I look at the shoulder. And the shoulder is great to look at if you're trying to figure out where that lineman is going on run. It is not necessarily the best trigger tail to tell you when. The shoulder tells you where, doesn't tell you when. So the hand, the elbow, the back heel, depending on the situation, will tell you when to move, not necessarily where. So trigger tails is very important, and that is a drill within itself. To be able to have a lineman in front of your blitzer, in front of your DN, your nose tackle, and just being able to teach them to move, right? Here goes that neuromuscular activity, to move once they see their triggers move. Once they see their triggers move, then they should know that fast twitch neuromuscular response should go. And that has a lot to do with having good eye discipline. You're teaching them to have good eye discipline just by simply having somebody line up in front of them and say, we're going to look at the hand as our trigger tail. We're going to look at the ball as our trigger tail. The eyes play a huge role in explosion. Now, drills. What are some drills that we can do to get our athletes to be more explosive off the ball? To be very honest with you, if you have incorporated any of those things in the weight room that I mentioned, plyometrics, doing a deadlift off of a snap, or working on trigger tails in the weight room. Truthfully, if you are doing anything of the sort, you've already started your drills. You've started them in the weight room already, and now you're carrying them out to the field. When it comes to being explosive off the ball, some of the things that hinder athletes from being explosive off the ball is their hands. Okay? And I'm talking pass rush right now. Guys they don't throw their hands out far enough. They don't throw their hands out far enough. A lot of times their hands come under the chin, which prevents their hips from really extending out when it comes to getting off the ball for pass. So a lot of times it's the hands. So what do I do with that? There's a rag drill get off that I like to do where the athlete, DNs, 3-point or D tackles or blitzers, as in my linebackers, we're in a 3-point stance. We have a rag in our backhand. And on our first two steps, especially that first step, I'm taking that rag and I'm trying to throw that rag out as far as I can. That's a good one because it's teaching me to try to maximize ground, gaining ground on my first step. I might be hitting him on my second. I might be hitting him on my third. So that first step, I really have to maximize how much ground that I gain by throwing my hand across more ground. Got to throw my hand out. So rag get-offs is a great drill to do to help athletes, blitzers, linebackers, edge rushers, wide interior linemen like a 4-eye rusher, because they have the space to do it, teaches them to throw their hands out there and gain more ground on their first step. That's number one. Another get-off, another drill that helps with explosion and get-off, I love to do every day. It's part of my EDDs, which is everyday drills, is get-offs under the chute. We've got to stretch our body across that turf. We've got to work on keeping our shoulders down in our get-off. And the reason why oftentimes our pass rushers are popping up, whether it be run or pass, in their get-off and not showing explosion is because they're trying to track the back. And they track the back with their eyes. So what are they doing? They're throwing their chins up. They're trying to find the ball. And you're not seeing explosion. You're seeing exploration, right? They're trying to explore what's behind the guy in front of me. That's what I like to say. You're not exploding, you're exploring. And if we can teach them to have better eye discipline and teach them to not necessarily throw their chins up because then their hips come under them like a kettlebell, like a power clean. We're not power cleaning necessarily off the ball, all right? We're keeping our nose and number down, eyes up, nose and number down. But we've got to be able to come out of our hips with a flat back. You're going to see explosion. You're going to see chaos, absolutely. So what are they doing? Okay, what does the chute do? The chute get-off drill teaches them to come out of their hips while maintaining leverage. None of my athletes yet has hit the chute because it's painful. I like to do it without the helmet. Then I'll put the helmet on because it's teaching them to keep their shoulders down and keeping them playing with a flat back. So chute get-offs is another good drill, and it is also on my website. I do it as an EDD, and then I will progress out of the chute. And I tell them to get off the ball explosively with their trigger tails, but carry the chute out. Pretend that the chute is extending all the way through your third step, if that makes sense. So I'm not doing it to where they're one step and they're out of the chute. Oftentimes I'll put them at the back of the chute and have them run through the chute so that they are staying low for at least 2 steps. So when they're actually getting off the ball outside of the chute, they know that the chute is still over their head. So we're trying to create good muscle memory where they are understanding that I've got to play as if I'm coming out of the chute. I've got to get off the ball as if I'm coming out of a chute. So the chute get-offs, if you don't have a chute, use a stick over their head, some kind of indicator, a pad, some kind of indicator that they have to stay low in their get-off, and you'll definitely see a lot more explosion in their get-offs if they know that there's something over their head. That's also a very good drill. Pre-practice, it'll be good to be able to do some bounding. I don't know if your athletes can bound frog jumps, right, where they're actually taking the kettlebell concept or the power clean concept and they're coming out of their hips. That might be a good pre-practice. Okay, I'm a firm believer in pre-practice. Coming out of the chute, you may not have time to do it during practice. I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you don't, that would be a great pre-practice. Being able to work on trigger tails as a drill, where a guy is in front of you, and if you're a 6-eye, you're looking at the tight end's hand that's down. That's your trigger tail. That could be done pre-practice. But a lot of these things, if you don't have time during practice, it's those athletes' job. Big Dog, is your responsibility to do these things in your pre-practice to prepare your body to be explosive. But jumping, bounding, exploding, single leg get-offs is another great drill where you're in your stance and that back foot is off the ground and you're working on getting off the ball with that back foot in the air and you're driving off your power foot, which is your front foot to me. I call the power foot the front foot. Okay. Truthfully, the best way that I can help you, that a coach should be able to really see what your issue is with your explosion. It might be your core. It may be your glutes aren't firing. It might be that you have too many erect weight room exercises, meaning your chest and chin is up. Might be too many of those in your weight room, so your body's confused on what explosion is. In order for me to truly see what it is that's preventing you and what you need, what prescription you need to be more explosive, always for me, it's a film evaluation. And that's why I mentioned the Zooms. Being able to look at that film, being able to see exactly what that issue is, why explosion isn't happening, is going to come through a film evaluation. It's almost like a doctor prescribing a medicine. It's like a doctor prescribing a medicine and they haven't done any testing on it. Okay, they just say, take this because I think it's what you might need without actually running tests and doing any kind of assessments. Truthfully, through assessment, through film evaluation, a coach, myself, will be able to know exactly what's needed to help you be explosive off the ball. So, Big Dog, I can go on, on and on about this because this is a very important question. Coaches, athletes, this is very important. Being explosive is going to be one of the number one things that's going to create chaos for that offense. Being able to get off the ball, whether it be your fast twitch muscles, your neuromuscular activity, having great eye discipline, being able to triple extend and come out of your hips, being able to play with good leverage, all those things will eventually come together and you're going to have that explosion that you need to create chaos in the backfield, whether it be your run game, whether it be against double teams, against scoops. You're too doggone fast. You're too explosive. You may not even be the strongest guy, but because you're so explosive and you're able to put yourself in positions before anybody can get to you, that's going to cause problems. That's what football is about, right? The name of the game is POA, points of attack. How quickly can I explode to my POA? How quickly can I get to my point of attack? And that's where we create chaos for offenses, and that's what dogs do. Dogs create chaos for the offense. It's a controlled chaos It is an explosion of power getting to that point of attack. Coaches, that's what's going to make your defensive linemen some of the best guys they can be. Big Dog, that's what's going to have you be great at the line of scrimmage. All those things that we mentioned. You've got to be explosive, and you got to be able to take the time to do what you need to do to be explosive at the line of scrimmage. More to come on this topic. I hope this was helpful. You're watching this video on YouTube. Again, leave comments. If there's any questions that you may have, topics that you'd like for me to dig into as I'm doing now, please leave them in the comment section. I read them all. We read them all. And we'll be sure to get to them because this is for you. Big Dog, you know what time it is. Let's go to work. Work, work, work. Let's work. Work, 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 work.